Let's get physical. It's Jordan here, back in with this month's update on all the physical releases coming to PlayStation and Xbox consoles. As always, this video was researched, written, and edited by my man Tim. Nothing to do with me, it is only my voice and the occasional interjection with my terrible opinions. Let's see what we've got coming this month. Dragon Quest VII Reimagined is releasing on the 5th of February for Xbox, PlayStation 5, Switch, and Switch 2 as a game key worldwide. Originally released on PlayStation 1 in the year 2000, Dragon Quest VII was infamous even by JRPG standards, an enormous, slow burn epic that asked players to wait several hours before even their first proper battle, then rewarded that patience with one of the most sprawling, melancholy adventures in the series. Critically respected but divisive, it sold extremely well in Japan, while earning a reputation elsewhere as a game for the deeply committed rather than the casually curious. This reimagined edition follows the later 3DS remake's attempts to sand down the roughest edges, modernizing the presentation and pacing while preserving the time-hopping structure of restoring lost continents and resolving self-contained, often surprisingly bleak stories. It remains a long haul even with some of the islands cut, but it is a polished revisit to one of Dragon Quest's most ambitious entries. One to check out for sure, and my executive producers over on Patreon: Joshua L., Jeddah Crow, Punky Dooster, Adamantium, Dane Wilkinson, Brent McLean, The Nemo 6, Michael Del Polito, Jennifer M., Precision Plague, and Dave Huswaite have chosen this as their pick of the month. Clock Tower Rewind is releasing on the 5th of February for PlayStation 5 and Switch in Europe. Rewind is essentially a very bare bones port of 1995's Clock Tower, one of the earliest survival horrors. Already released by LRG in North America and at retail in Asia, it's now going to be finally available in Europe. You play as a teenage orphan, Jennifer, exploring the eerie Barrows mansion, scouring for items and clues while desperately trying to evade the psychotic Scissor Man. Two modes are on offer: Original, a straight version of the 1995 release with a proper international translation, and Rewind, an enhanced mode that stitches in content from later PlayStation sequels, expands hiding spots and chase mechanics, and tacks on quality of life tweaks like better movement, save states, and rewind functionality. A classic. If you were holding out for the European retail release, well, now is your chance. My Hero Academia All's Justice is releasing on the 6th of February for Xbox and PlayStation 5 worldwide. The latest licensed fighter based on My Hero Academia, All's Justice throws you a sizable roster of quirky characters into 3D arenas for tag battles. You juggle opponents, you have cinematic super moves, and the obligatory anime flair that you'd expect. The roster size and presentation are solid. I'm not well versed in the MHA at all, but fans seem particularly pleased with the size and range. There's plenty of fan favorites from UA High and beyond, so that means something to someone. I think this will be a solid pickup for fans. For anyone else, it looks like a licensed anime fighter that avoids reinvention in favor of what's familiar and loud. But my executive producer, JCross7776, he's chosen this as his pick of the month. And if you want it, or any of the retail games in this video, please consider purchasing via the links in the description and pinned comment. That massively helps support me, this channel, and especially this series to keep producing useful physical content for you guys. VGP are a very nice company with free worldwide shipping on orders over 75 Canadian bucks, which is like 54 American dollars, not that much. Plus each week, if you buy something via my link, you are put into a draw to have a chance of winning a $10 discount coupon. I announce the winner every Monday in my Switch Physicals video. Nioh 3 is releasing on the 6th of February for PlayStation 5 worldwide. Nioh 3 continues Team Ninja's second life. The studio that once defined itself with Ninja Gaiden restructured in the mid-2010s and pivoted hard into punishing action RPGs and really made it stick. The original Nioh was a huge critical hit, praised for its depth, speed, and unapologetic difficulty, while Nioh 2 refined that formula into something many fans argue is Team Ninja's finest work. This third entry builds directly on that legacy, leaning into what the studio does best: intricate combat systems, demanding enemy designs, and an almost obsessive love of mechanical depth. It keeps the historical myth mashup Japan setting and expands the scope with more open environments and introduces dual combat styles. Brutally precise, loot heavy, and proudly unconcerned with accessibility, If you are already on board, this looks like a confident continuation from a studio that finally knows exactly what kind of game it wants to make. KEMCO RPG Selection Volume 3 is releasing on the 12th of February for PlayStation 5 and Switch in North America. You know the drill, it's the Western release of a very popular KEMCO RPG series. You're stretching very popular there. This is out on most consoles already in Japan and Asia. A 4-in-1 RPG compilation that bundles 4 distinct fantasy adventures into one physical package. Volume 3 contains Frayne, Dragon's Odyssey, Sephirothic Stories, Jesus Christ, As Divine Dios, and Illusion of Falsia. What? If you enjoy aesthetics and traditional JRPG tropes with a mix of puzzle elements, turn-based combat, and low-key fantasy narratives, then this collection is a tidy bundle of modesty that may be worth looking into, and my executive producer, my man in Japan, Vei, has chosen this as his pick of the month. DreadOut Remastered Collection is releasing on the 12th of February for PlayStation 5 in North America, already released in Japan and Asia, and Europe, who received this in March. This bundles the original DreadOut and its standalone expansion, Keepers of the Dark, lightly polished and sold as a remaster in the loosest possible sense. While its Indonesian folklore and lo-fi ghost photography still give it a distinct flavor, Steam reviews are decidedly mixed, with many pointing out the clunky controls, awkward puzzles, and general jank that has survived the remastering process. A cult horror curiosity for the patient and forgiving, but very much a reminder that atmosphere alone doesn't magically fix old problems. But if you never played it, I do recommend it, but then again, I do enjoy the jank. It's kind of charming. Yakuza Kiwami 3 and Dark Tides is releasing on the 12th of February for PlayStation 4, Xbox, and PlayStation 5, and there is a Nintendo Switch 2 game key. Boo! A 2-in-1 package from Sega's Ryuga Gotoku studio, a full remake of Yakuza 3 built from scratch in the modern Dragon engine, plus an all-new story expansion you can play right alongside it. Kiwami 3 stars Kazuma Kiryu defending his Okinawan orphanage and loved ones, now with overhauled combat and new Ryukyu weapon-based fighting styles, expanded cutscenes, richer side content, and a new team battle mode where you build a biker gang with the Ryukyu Gal Gang and charge enemy bases. Dark Ties is a standalone prequel that lets you control Yoshitaka Mine, the antagonist from the original game. His combat leans into boxing-inspired moves and the Dark Awakening mode that unleashes brutal combos, alongside an underground fight club mode called Hell's Arena. Feels weird to have a remake of 3 without Nagoshi, and I've avoided spoilers myself, but it does seem to be a remake that refreshes a controversial classic, but not without creating new controversies itself, as it looks like there will be some controversy regarding the new ending. I think it'll be okay though, and my executive producers, Mr. Awesome, God of Resin, and my man Tim have chosen this as their pick of the month. BlazBlue Entropy Effect X, or is it Cross? Who knows, is releasing on the 12th of February for PlayStation 5 and Switch in North America, but Europe will have to wait a little bit longer. A genre shift for the BlazBlue franchise. This is not a one-on-one fighter, but a 2D action roguelite built around fast-paced combat with familiar characters from the series. Not sure what the demand is for a BlazBlue roguelite, but for fans, there is a new story about a crumbling world and the enigmatic research trying to save it. Despite the familiar cast and flashy combos, the BlazBlue community has mixed feelings. Some love seeing the roster in a new context, while others grumble it's not the fighting game they expected, and the pricing for the physical edition has raised eyebrows. ChromaGun 2 Die Hard is releasing on the 12th of February for Xbox, PlayStation 5, and Nintendo Switch 2. A first-person puzzle shooter from indie developer Pixel Maniacs, building on the mechanics of the original by having you fire primary colors from the titular ChromaGun at walls, droids, and objects. You solve logic-heavy, physics-based puzzles. Unlike Portal's teleportation, this seems to be more about color mixing and sticking objects to surfaces of matching colors to open paths, redirect drones, or activate switches across chambers. If you're craving Portal-adjacent problem solving and don't mind something that's a bit rough around the edges, then this will hopefully scratch that itch. Ride 6 is releasing on the 12th of February for Xbox and PlayStation 5 in Europe, Asia, and Japan. The latest entry in Milestone's long-running motorcycle racing series, you'll find a massive roster of bike-spanning heritage classics, modern superbikes, and niche performance machines. licensed tracks, and a variety of race modes that mix sprint laps with endurance challenges and time attacks. Fans of prior titles will appreciate the depth of customization, expanded career mode, and social features, but if you're not already on board with rides mechanics, this is unlikely to be the one that converts you. Bug Fables, the everlasting sapling, was supposed to release on the 12th of February for PS5 and Switch in Europe, but I think it's just been delayed to March. Anyways, I'll talk about it now. One of the better regarded Paper Mario descendants, Bug Fables has spent the last few years quietly building a reputation as the indie homage that actually understands why Paper Mario worked. A trio of insect adventurers explore a world with turn-based combat, party synergy, and mild puzzle solving. Overwhelmingly positive reviews on this one, stating it's charming, well-written, and mechanically solid. A nice retail physical release. Compared to limited runs, this one will be complete on cart with all the updates and stuff like that, so it's the best version to get. And my executive producers Nerdy Sean and Surfacing for Air have chosen this as their pick of the month. REANIMAL is releasing on the 13th of February for Xbox, PlayStation 5, and Nintendo Switch 2 as a game key. Boo! From the creators of Little Nightmares, REANIMAL looks like the studio very deliberately proving it can do grim, oppressive horror without the safety net of another numbered sequel. It's familiar territory, a co-op friendly horror adventure starring a brother and sister navigating a bleak island, solving environmental puzzles, rowing between locations, and doing their best not to get eaten by things that look designed specifically to eat you. Early footage suggests it's darker than Little Nightmares, with an emphasis on atmosphere, with fixed camera angles, shared screens in co-op, and slow, deliberate pacing, which will either feel like confident restraint or like the studio playing the same notes in a slightly different key. Who knows? If you like Tarsia's previous work but wished it was less storybook unsettling and more outright miserable, this could land nicely with you. Cautious optimism is probably the sensible stance, and my executive producers, Azrath, Viz, and Dead Bunny's YouTube have chosen this as their pick of the month. Cooking Companions is releasing on the 13th of February for PlayStation 5 in North America. This has been delayed by a few months, so just a quick recap. Originally released on PC in 2021, it's a cute psychological horror visual novel with a dark, unsettling twist. Set in a remote cabin in the Tatras Mountains, a group of friends must survive starvation, rising floodwaters, and a creeping sense of dread as relationships fray and paranoia mounts. Features multiple endings, branching narrative choices. It's one that's designed to subvert your expectations. Totally Reliable Delivery Service is releasing on the 13th of February for PlayStation 5 and Switch, a physics-based party game built around deliberately clumsy movement, floppy characters, and the notion that this automatically equals comedy. This originally released a few years ago on PC. It had its moments as streamer fodder and couch co-op noise, but the novelty wears thin once you realize the systems just aren't deep enough to support the mayhem long term. Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma is releasing on the 13th of February for PlayStation 5. It's already out on Switch and Switch 2. The latest entry in the franchise, the familiar rhythm of farming, crafting, monster taming, and relationship building, now with a slightly more action-orientated twist on dungeon crawling. Growing crops, raising livestock, and forging tools by day, then heading out into sprawling areas to fend off threats with real-time combat. Fans will recognize that this iteration pushes a bit harder on structured quests and combat encounters compared to earlier installments, but reviews praise the breadth of activities and seasonal rhythm that makes you feel like you're living in Azuma, but also know that the balance can occasionally feel stretched between chores and heroics. Calamity Angel's Special Delivery is releasing on the 17th of February for PS4, PS5, and Switch, a delivery service RPG from Compile Heart where you lead a ragtag crew of parcel carriers across the fantastical Orcotris region, something like that, hauling packages through treacherous terrain and a cavalcade of monsters. Gameplay mixes board game style movement with RPG battles and mood management mechanics where you have to keep your crew happy or they may ignore your orders. This is no doubt an aggressively niche Compile Heart project than a coherent post-apocalyptic Death Stranding RPG, but fans of Idea Factory and Compile Heart will no doubt be keen to try. Castle of Heart Retold is releasing on the 17th of February for PlayStation 5 and Nintendo Switch. A lightly polished second attempt at a game that already disappointed most. This is a side-scrolling action platform with tight arenas, unforgiving enemy placement, and boss fights that seem designed to test your tolerance rather than your skill. There's definitely an audience for this, and if you're after a 2D Souls-like that is a bit janky, then this may be one for you. Mythwrecked Ambrosia Island is releasing on the 19th of February for PlayStation 5 in Europe, a story-focused exploration game that drops you on a Greek island populated by gods who've forgotten who they are, then asks you to help remember them via light exploration, item hunting, and a lot of dialogue. Mechanically, it's very simple. Wander the island, follow pings on a scanner, return objects, repeat. The writing and setting do most of the heavy lifting, but the actual structure leans heavily into fetch-style loops and low-stakes interaction, which some players found relaxing, others found it a bit thin. Death Match Love Comedy is releasing on the 19th of February for PS5 and Switch in Europe, a weirdly specific visual novel that literally turns dating into a death sentence where the protagonist, Keiyagi, is cursed so that the next time someone confesses their love to him, he explodes and dies. Originally a 2020 Japanese release, which was itself a remake of a much older mobile title, this marks the first official Western console launch. If you've ever wondered what a visual novel would be like if Romeo and Juliet were a slapstick horror comedy with flowcharts and death by romance, well, here you go. Styx Blades of Greed is releasing on the 19th of February for Xbox and PlayStation 5 in Europe. North America will be a bit later on next month, I think. The third Styx Games continues Cyanide's take on stealth action, centering on sneaking and vertical level design. Blades of Greed expands environments and progression systems, adding more open spaces and a broader skill tree, but the fundamentals remain very familiar if you've played the previous two. The tone is still sardonic fantasy, with Styx's commentary doing most of the narrative work, while you creep through forts, airships, and industrial fantasy spaces. This feels less like a reinvention and more like a careful attempt to modernize a mid-budget stealth series without alienating the people who already liked it. WiZmans World Re is releasing on the 19th of February for PlayStation 5 and Switch in both North America and Europe. A HD remaster of a Japanese-only DS RPG from 2010, Retry updates the Wizarding adventure into 2026 with updated pixel art, a rearranged soundtrack, a modern user interface, and some quality of life features like save anywhere, dialogue skips, and new game plus modes. Battles are turn-based and attribute-heavy, demanding you think about chains, elemental strengths, and party roles rather than button mashing. The original never saw an official Western release, so this is the first time many players will get a proper localized version. And my executive producer, Miami Sunrise, has chosen this as his pick of the month. Ys 10 Proud Nordics is releasing on the 20th of February for PlayStation 5 and Nintendo Switch 2 as a game key. Boom! An expanded and retooled edition of Ys Nordics, Proud Nordics is pitched as the definitive edition of this action RPG, adding new story content, mechanics, bosses, and arenas on top of the original narrative. There's been some considerable pushback amongst fans who already own the original Nordics, as there's no clear free or paid upgrade path for existing versions, leading to a lot of chatter about either passing on it or waiting for a heavily discounted price. It's more than a straight port, think of it as like Persona 5 Royal style expansion, but it's also the kind of re-release that has made both fans and critics sigh when asked to buy essentially the same game twice, and my executive producer Kava Clavacol has chosen this as his pick of the month. Death Howl is releasing on the 20th of February for PlayStation 5 and Switch. This is a dark, genre-blending indie that has built a strong reputation since its PC launch last year. Death Howl fuses deck-building strategy with Souls-like toughness and grid-based combat. You explore realms divided into multiple regions, gather ingredients to craft cards, and deploy those cards in combat. It sounds like my worst nightmare. The game has landed well, boasting positive reviews on Steam and praise for its unique fusion of mechanics, haunting atmosphere, and emotional narrative, though there is some skepticism about how genuinely Souls-like it actually is. The combat is labeled as such, but it's turn-based, so who knows. One to check out if you want something a bit different, but still like deck building. Military Logistics Simulator is releasing on the 20th of February for PlayStation 5 in Europe. Woohoo! There's going to be an unavoidable awkwardness to releasing a military logistics sim in 2026 against the backdrop of grim geopolitics and yet more depressing news cycles. What might once have felt like a dry, technical roleplay instead lands like an oddly bleak less escapism and more of an interactive reminder that the world is going to pot. But if that wasn't enough reason not to buy it, luckily it is awful, with one of the worst review Steam pages I have seen for a long while. Full negative reviews across the board. Broken, ugly, and just downright rubbish. But less about me and more about this game. It's probably not one to look into. The House of the Dead 2 Remake is releasing on the 20th of February for PS4, PS5, and it's already on Switch. Another attempt to exhume the series and convince it to function in a world without light guns, this remake updates Sega's zombie shooter with cleaner visuals, that's debatable, and modern controls. The branching routes and co-op remain intact, but the fundamental issue: this was built for plastic guns, noisy arcade cabinets, and the 5-minute credit feeds. And this remake manages to strip away all of that charm. It neither preserves the original faithfully nor meaningfully modernizes it, an awkward middle ground where nobody really wins, unless you absolutely love the late 2000s piss filter. The reception has not helped the case. There are negative reviews all round for this. No Sleep for Kaname Date from AI Somnium Files, releasing on the 26th of February for PlayStation 5. It's already out on Switch and Switch 2, a spin-off/standalone follow-up to AI. The Somnium Files, this detective adventure blends visual novel storytelling with investigation, dream diving, and escape room puzzle sequences. Mechanically, it mixes the familiar Somnium Files elements, gathering clues in the real world, diving into suspect's subconscious dream, the Somnium sequences, and now dedicated escape room puzzle segments where logic and observation matter more than dialogue choices. The Midnight Walk is releasing on the 27th of February for PlayStation 5 and PlayStation VR 2 in Europe, a dark first-person adventure that technically isn't a VR-only game. You can play on a standard screen, but the VR 2 support is a big part of its identity, with many players citing the VR presentation as where the mood and atmosphere truly land, thanks to the sense of scale, presence, and uncanny visuals. Reviews have skewed very positively, suggesting that the blend of eerie exploration-like puzzles and stealth-tinged moments resonate well with those who've tried it so far. Resident Evil Requiem is releasing on the 27th of February for Xbox, PlayStation 5, and Nintendo Switch 2 as a game key. Boo! The 9th mainline installment in Capcom's long-running survival horror franchise returns the series to classic Resident Evil territory, with tense exploration, puzzles, and resource scarcity, this time built in the modern RE engine. It follows an original character, FBI agent Grace Ashcroft, who investigates a grim outbreak and the lingering horrors of a devastated Raccoon City. Development has been unusually tumultuous, having reportedly shifted direction dramatically mid-production after years in the work. Capcom has leaned into nostalgia by reconnecting Requiem with the overarching narrative of the first 6 games, rather than continuing the separate arcs of 7 and 8. Requiem promises both first-person and third-person perspectives, heavier survival horror beats, and a mix of exploration and combat that aims to recapture the tension that the series is known for in its heyday. I am weirdly optimistic about it, but, cautiously so. It's going to be a big release for this year, and my executive producers, Lewis K, Instacritic, Super Ben Julio, Dave Horwath, Justin PDC, Cartoon Soren, and Jimmy A. Guerrero have chosen this as their pick of the month. Little Gator Game Gator of the Year Edition is releasing on the 27th of February for PlayStation 5 and Nintendo Switch. This edition bundles the original Little Gator game, a cozy open-world platform adventure about a little gator exploring a cheerful island, making friends and messing about, with the upcoming In the Dark expansion, which adds an underground area and new characters alongside the base content. The original built a solid reputation as a bright, low-pressure adventure with generally favorable reviews, and it's nice to see a physical version that is definitive. If you don't already own Super Rare's version, then get this one. Tales of Berseria Remastered is releasing on the 27th of February for Xbox, PlayStation 5, and Nintendo Switch. Originally released in 2016 on PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, this remaster brings Velvet Crow's darker, vengeance-driven JRPG to current hardware with modern polish and quality-of-life tweaks. This version includes all original DLC, like costumes and bonus items, visuals and performance improvements, and convenient features such as destination markers, enemy encounter toggles, and early access to the grade shop. Despite being less than a decade old and already playable on PlayStation 5, the remaster has stirred some eye rolls in the community. Many fans find it puzzling that Bandai Namco chose to remaster this relatively recent title, one that's already available at 60 frames per second on modern consoles, instead of older classics that really need one. But cynicism aside, for newcomers without access to the original editions, this is the easiest way yet to play one of the more narratively ambitious Tales entries, and my executive producers, Firm Returns, Robotech, and Sora Cat, chosen this as their pick of the month. Everdark Undead Apocalypse is releasing on the 27th of February for PlayStation 5 in Europe, a small-scale survival shooter built around scavenging, limited resources, and slow movement through zombie-filled environments. The focus is less on spectacle and more on stretching what you have, with combat that expects caution rather than aggression. Reception suggests a very modest experience with repetitive encounters and stiff controls keeping expectations firmly in check. Sword of Necromancer Collection is releasing on the 27th of February for PlayStation 4, PS5, and Nintendo Switch in Europe. A bundled physical release collecting the Sword of Necromancer games into one package, built around a simple hook. Defeated enemies can be resurrected and used as allies while dungeon crawling. This set includes both the original 2D action RPG and the later 3D reworking alongside a small spin-off. Reception across the series has been mixed, with the concept doing more of the talking than the actual execution. This feels less like a must-have and more like a tidy archival box for a modest indie project that never quite broke out. Make Way is releasing on the 27th of February for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 in Europe, a top-down DIY multiplayer racing game where you and up to 5 friends build your own tracks, then race through them. You place loops, seesaws, hazards, and obstacles mid-match and watch what happens next. Originally released digitally in 2023, it's quietly built a solid reputation with praise for its party game energy and silly course creation loop. The physical release feels exactly what it is, a niche, light-hearted racing oddity rather than a landmark title. A quick mention to Inspector Waffle's Early Days, which should be releasing this month. It was supposed to release last month, but it did not. Alright, limited run games. Capcom Arcade Stadium Volume 1 pre-orders for this end on the 8th of February for Xbox, PS4 and Nintendo Switch. This one is actually pretty interesting. A physical box release of Capcom's sprawling arcade compilation of 30 classic arcade games spanning from 1984 to 2001. It's essentially a time capsule of coin-op history, early shooters like 1942, side-scrolling action games like Bionic Commando and Final Fight, and heavyweight nostalgia draws such as Street Fighter II and Strider. A nice title to own, and one that's a shame it took so long to release physically. And my executive producer, OGCIB, has chosen this as his pick of the month. Outlaws plus Handful of Missions Remaster pre-orders for this end on the 8th of February for PS5 and Nintendo Switch, a remastered edition of 1997's obscure LucasArts Wild West FPS that never quite hit the same cultural heights as its 90s peers. Remastered lightly with some modern visuals, updated cutscenes, cross-play multiplayer, and quality-of-life tweaks like weapon wheels and controller rumble. This has actually been quite well received on its digital release, but mainly from those that have fond memories of playing it before. If you missed it the first time around and like retro shooters with a dash of spaghetti western, then this gives you a decent doorway in. The Stone of Madness pre-orders end on the 15th of February for PS5 and Switch, a tactical stealth adventure indie title that has you guiding a small team of prisoners through an 18th century Spanish monastery, switching between characters with their unique skills, using stealth, distraction, and planning to outsmart the guards. Critics and players are fairly split on whether it earns its concept. On Metacritic, it lands in the mixed or average tier, with some reviewers praising the layered tactics and gloomy atmosphere, but others citing frustrating mechanics, technical roughness, and occasional balance issues. Darkwood pre-orders for this end on the 22nd of February for PS5, a top-down atmospheric survival horror game that's considered by some to be a modern classic. Darkwood is known for its slow, oppressive atmosphere rather than jump scares or cinematic horror. The structure revolves around careful daytime scavenging and tense nights spent barricading yourself in against whatever the woods decides to throw at you. It's been well regarded over time, particularly on PC, though its reputation is very much tied to its difficulty, opaque systems, and refusal to guide the player. For some, that restraint builds genuine tension, for others it tips into frustration. The Ernest Evans collection pre-orders for this end on the 22nd of February for PS4, PS5, and Switch. This collection bundles the entire Cult trilogy from Wolf Team. El Viento, a fast-paced platformer that meets 1920s gangster horror with boomerangs and magic against the occult cults. Ernest Evans, whip-wielding archaeologist, hunts world-ending idols in a notoriously awkward but oddly charming side-scroller. Annette Futatabe focuses on swordplay and magic combat, shifting from exploration to beat-em-up action. For retro action platformer fans, it's a complete package, rough edges, quirky charm and all. Hi-Fi Rush pre-orders for this end on the 1st of March for Xbox and PlayStation 5. Originally released in 2023, Hi-Fi Rush was a genuine left-field hit from Tango Gameworks, blending character action combat with rhythm mechanics where attacks, dodges, and even the environments sync into the music. It stood out immediately for its cel-shaded art style, humor, and a soundtrack that actually mattered mechanically. Critically and commercially, it landed well, earning strong reviews and a devoted fanbase. This physical release doesn't add new content, but it does give one of the more distinctive action games of the generation a long overdue physical edition, and given the studio's later closure, that feels somewhat bittersweet. One to check out for sure, and my executive producer Cartoon Soren has chosen this as his pick of the month. Alright, the import section. If you want to import any of these, you can do so via my Play Asia links, and if you click my link, you can also get 5% off if you use the code Jordan2026. Promise Mascot Agency is releasing on the 19th of February for PlayStation 5 and Switch in Asia. There is a Western release in June. A quirky life sim meets management game where you run a talent agency for Japanese mascot characters, juggling schedules, training, PR events, and sponsored requests. It leans hard into absurdity and comedic character interactions rather than, like a deep simulation. Reception has been both positive and curious, but seemingly mainly enjoyed for its dry humor and offbeat premise. With a June Western release coming, I feel like this import is more of a niche oddity rather than a must purchase, but bound to appeal to fans of weird simulation games and mascot culture rather than, general audiences. And my executive producer Rose has chosen this as her pick of the month. City Hunter is releasing on the 26th of February for PlayStation 5 and Switch in Japan and Asia. There will be a European release in March. This is a remastered revival of the game originally released on the PC Engine in 1990 and based on Tsukasa Hojo's long-running manga and anime franchise. This 2026 version updates the classic 2D side-scrolling action for modern systems with multiple language support and other quality of life enhancements, aiming to bring the nearly 35-year-old title to a fresh worldwide audience for the first time. It's positioned as a celebration for the series' 40th anniversary rather than like a full remake from scratch. It preserves the original gameplay and story beats while making it more accessible than its Japanese-only beginnings. This is likely to feel rather dated to modern gamers, but it is kind of a curiosity. Tokyo Xtreme Racer is releasing on the 26th of February for PlayStation 5 in Japan. There's actually no word on languages. It's very difficult to find information on the languages included on the PlayStation 5 version, but the Steam edition does have English, so I think it's likely to have English on PlayStation 5, but not certain as of yet. This is a long-awaited PS5 port of 2025's Tokyo Xtreme Racer, the reboot, a revival of Genki's iconic street racing series, and the first entry on PlayStation hardware in over 20 years. It's already out on PC, earning strong community praise on Steam with very positive reviews. Set on the Shuto Expressway in a sealed-off future Tokyo, the reboot focuses less on lap times and more on head-to-head rival duels, where you challenge racers by flashing headlights and aim to drain their resolve points in tense battles while weaving through traffic and customizing your ride. I think this is going to do very well as an import, and fingers crossed it does have English, because it is my pick of the month. Yeah, I really said that. Raiden Fighters Remix Collection is releasing on the 26th of February for PlayStation 5 and Switch in Asia, a remix revival of 3 classic 90s vertical shooters, Raiden Fighters 2, and Raiden Fighters Jet. Compiled together and updated for modern consoles, this collection includes both the Japanese and Western arcade versions of each game, extra quality of life features like practice modes, retry options, and customizable music, plus remix soundtracks and display filters including CRTs and Tate mode. This is niche but a notable arrival for old school shmup fans. Candy Rangers is releasing on the 26th of February for PlayStation 5 in Japan, an on-rail shooter where you control 4 sibling rangers, Candy, Mint, Lemon, and Plum, each with a unique shooting style, sideways, vertical, back and forth, diagonal, to match the color-coded enemies flooding the screen. More than 20 levels, plus hidden secret paths, 4 boss battles, branching routes, and a hard mode where each hit doubles your time penalty. Looks like an interesting title, but so far has completely flown under the radar. But my executive producer, D's Nuts, has chosen this as his pick of the month. Biohazard 30th Special Pack Volume 1 and 2 are both releasing on the 27th of February for PlayStation 5. Part of Capcom's 30th anniversary celebrations for the Resi franchise, these special packs bundle several major titles into commemorative physical editions, releasing exclusively in Japan and Asia. Volume 1 collects Resident Evil Requiem, the deluxe edition, the new game, Resi 7, the gold edition, the grotesque version as well, and Resi Village, which is the 8th game, in one anniversary box. Volume 2 pairs Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4, the remakes, in one package together. Neat little collections to import, but not essential by any means if you own them already. Japan is also getting these two games, which have already released in the West. Japan is also getting this game, which does not have English and is not worth importing unless you know Japanese. Alright, the community spotlight for my producers over on Patreon. Sora Cat sent in this photo showing off their collector's edition of Trails Beyond the Horizon. I really wish these would be more readily available at retail stores, but I get there's a much higher profit margin for NIS America if they keep it on their site and cut out the middleman, but I think they'd sell more if they did send some units to retail. These Nuts sent in this photo showing off his love for the Code Vein series. I literally don't know anything about this game, but I suspect it is a serviceable action game with some fan-servicey artwork in the character design. Let me know if I'm wrong or right about that. My man in Japan, sent in this photo showing off a bunch of PlayStation 5 games that launched in Japan very recently. I think the only one exclusive to Japan, and I could be wrong on this, is Dark Auction, which looks awesome. I really wish I had the chance to review it, but Japanese devs are hard to contact, especially when you're rocking a Gmail address like myself. Dave Horworth sent in this photo showing off support for the ailing Xbox with Sister vs. Sister. I'm still really perplexed, and pleasantly so, that Idea Factory think Xbox gamers want to own this. It's cool and should be applauded that they're going to the extra effort to provide an option for gamers at least. Firm Returns also sent in some Xbox goodness. I heard Soul Hackers 2 is an excellent game, underrated in terms of the Atlas franchises, and this physical release goes for absolutely dirt cheap these days, so definitely worth getting if you want some JRPG goodness. And that is it for this month's Let's Get Physical on PlayStation and Xbox. Which is your pick of the month? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. As always, special thanks to my executive producers over on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. And if you watched all the way through, please leave me a dragon emoji in honor of Dragon Quest. And yeah, if you want to purchase any of these games, please do so via the links in the description. It really helps support this series especially. It's a lot of work for Tim to put this together, and it doesn't get as many views as my Switch Physicals video. So yeah, if you want to support it, purchase via the links below. That does show me that there's demand for it, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. Take care.